good day. Welcome to ITEP 203 QMMS, Lesson 1 Essentials of Quantitative Research Method. For this session, for day 1, we had our class orientation. For day 2, your module 1 self-study and engagement activity. And for day 3, this pre-recorded discussion, and later you will do your performance task 1. What are the objectives by the end of this lesson? By the end of this lesson, the student will understand the purpose of writing a quantitative research proposal, the types of quantitative method, the advantages and challenges of using quantitative methods, the research topics to which the use of quantitative research methods is most appropriate. The content of this presentation are the following. What is a quantitative research? What are the key components of quantitative research methods? What are the types of quantitative research, the tools to conduct it, the advantages, the limitations, when should we use it, and then later on, the summary. So ano nga ba yung quantitative research? Ang quantitative research is the process of collecting and analyzing numerical data. So ang umpisa ng quantitative research ay ang pagkolekta ng numerical data at kapag ito ay nakuha mo na, yung numerical data, i-analyze mo ito ngayon. Pwede itong gamitin to find patterns, averages, to make predictions, to test causal relationships, and generalize results to wider populations. Opposite ito ng qualitative research. Yung qualitative research, it involves collecting and analyzing non-numerical data. Kung ang quantitative research ay for numerical data, ang qualitative research naman is for non-numerical data such as text, video, or audio. Ang quantitative research, pati na din ang qualitative research, ito ay ginagamit sa natural and social sciences. Ginagamit ito sa biology, sa chemistry, sa psychology, economics, sociology, marketing, etc. So, ano ba yung isang example para mas maging malinaw sa atin kung ano yung quantitative research? Ang isang example, so meron ditong quantitative research question examples. So the first example here is, what is the demographic makeup of Singapore in 2020? How has the average temperature changed globally over the last century? Does environmental pollution affect the prevalence of honeybees? Does working from home increase productivity for people with long commutes? So let's try to analyze the first question. The first research question there is, what is the demographic makeup of Singapore in 2020? Ano ba yung tinatawag na demographic? So dito, gusto mong malaman yung demographic makeup ng Singapore ngayong taong 2020. First, let's discuss what demographics is. Pag sinabing demographics, ito yung pag-aaral ng population base sa mga factors ng mga tao doon, such as age, race, gender. Demographic data refers to socio-economic information expressed statistically. Ilan ba dun sa mga tao doon sa Singapore ang employed? Ilan yung unemployed? Ilan yung single? Ilan yung married? Ilan yung mga bata? Ilan yung mga nag-aaral ng high school? Ilan yung college? Ilan yung mga adult? At ilan yung mga senior citizen? So, you are trying to get the information about the population of a specific country. So, dun sa question natin na what is the demographic makeup of Singapore in 2020, gusto nating malaman ano ang itsura ng population ng Singapore ngayong taong to. So, if this is your research, if this is your quantitative research question example, what is the demographic makeup of Singapore in 2020? You need to think about ano ba yung mga data na kailangan mo. Saan mo makukuha itong data na to? Paano mo ito makakuha? Kailangan mo ba ng survey? Yung bang data na to ay available already? Baka naman available na, kailangan mo lang kuhanin. If gagamit ako ng survey, ano-ano kaya yung mga questionnaire or set of questions na dapat kong i-incorporate para malaman ko yung demographics ng kada isang tao na isusurvey ko? So this is an example of a quantitative research question quantitative research question. So as you can see here, you want to analyze a phenomenon. So it starts basically with questions, and then you will get and collect the data. As you can see here, quantitative research starts with quantitative research questions. And then, magko-collect ka ngayon ng data, tapos yung data na na-collect mo based on your questions, i-analyze mo ngayon ito. Yung mga numerical patterns, yung mga averages, pwede ka rin mag-make ng predictions. Halimbawa, ang gender distribution ng Singapore this year ay 30% to 70%. So, based on the pattern for previous years, pwede mo makita na nagbabago sila on this specific rate. So, by next year, pwede kang mag-predict na ganun din yung pagbabago ng gender distribution sa bansang Singapore. So that's what quantitative research is all about. It's all about process of collecting, analyzing numerical data for the purpose of finding patterns, averages, make predictions, test causal relationship, and generalize results to wider populations. Now it's your turn. Choose one among these research question examples, and then try to answer the following based on the research question of your choice. You can pause this video para gawin tong exercise na to. Okay, so let's proceed to our discussion. Ano naman yung difference between quantitative and qualitative research? Ang quantitative methods and qualitative methods ay magkaiba. Ang quantitative research, you are talking about numbers. While sa qualitative methods, you are talking about data that are not numbers. Ibig sabihin ay letters. Kaya nga sabi doon ay ina-analyze mo yung text, yung video, yung audio. So, maaaring madaming sagot na pwede mong makuha from qualitative method than quantitative methods. Ang quantitative methods mas defined kasi specifics yung pwede mong makuha from people. While sa qualitative method, yung quality ng text yung iyong ina-analyze. So, para mas maintindihan natin yung pagkakaiba ng dalawa, meron ditong examples. Example questions. How many times per month do you purchase a coffee from a cafe or coffee shop? Ito yung example ng quantitative questions. Yung kabila naman ay example ng qualitative questions. So, ang isang example ng quantitative question ay, how many times per month do you purchase a coffee from a cafe or a coffee shop? So, ang isasagot mo dyan ay 10 beses, 15 times, 20 times, 30 times, kung everyday nagpa-purchase ka ng kape from a coffee or coffee shop. Samantalang dito, sa kabilang tanong naman, what do you like most about your favorite cafe or coffee shop? Madami kang pwedeng isagot dyan. Pwede mong isagot ay, maganda yung service nila. Masaya ko dito dahil malapit sa workplace ko. So yung qualitative, answer for qualitative questions are very vast. Madaming pamimilian. At yung pinakang text, yung i-analyze mo. So samantalang dito sa quantitative questions, numbers yung tinitingnan mo. So, mas defined yung sagot dun sa mga questions. Ang isa pang example dyan ng quantitative question ay, how often do you drink coffee at home? Do you prefer to prepare coffee at home or purchase from a cafe or coffee shop? If applicable, which cafe or coffee shop do you go to most often? So, dito, mas defined yung pwede mong isagot sa quantitative questions, samantalang sa qualitative questions, mas vast. Okay, so nasa sa researcher na yon kung paano niya i-analyze yung qualitative questions. Pero sa quantitative questions, ang pwede mo diyang kuhanan ay frequency ng kada sagot, yung average, yung median, yung mode, yung variance. Dito mo na ginagamit yung mga pinag-aralan mo sa statistics. Okay naman, let's discuss about the key components of quantitative research method. So the first component or yung mga term na kailangan natin pag-aralan ay itong mga to. Ang unang term ay units. Kapag sinabing units, ito yung people or things we collect research data on. Ang ibang tawag dito ay research units. Ngayon, pag naman sinabing variable, ito yung mga specific characteristics ng units na nire-research natin. So, dun sa example nating research question kanina, na ano yung demographic makeup ng Singapore in 2020, ano yung unit natin doon? Sino or ano yung kinukuhanan natin ng data? Ito ay yung population or mga tao. Ngayon, para malaman natin yung demographic data ng mga tao, ano yung mga variables ng mga tao na kailangan natin kunin? Isang example doon ay gender, marital status, employment status, age, ethnicity. So, yun yung mga variables na kukunin natin sa units. So, depende sa research question mo, yung unit at yung variables na kukunin mo about your units. So, the next component would be, so we are still under variables. May dalawang uri ng variables. Una ay independent variable, pangalawa ay dependent variable. Kapag sinabing independent variable, ito yung nagbabago-bago. Tapos, yung independent variable, kapag binago mo yun, meron siyang direct effect dun sa mga dependent variable. Para mas maging malinaw sa atin to, meron ako ditong picture ng independent, dependent, and controlled. So, actually, ang i-discuss ko lang sa inyo is the independent and dependent. Ang independent variable, ito yung mga variables na pwedeng magbago. And ang isang example dito ay itong liquid na inilalagay mo sa halaman. Ang independent variable dyan ay kung anong liquid yon. So, meron ditong soda, may juice, may water. Ang dependent variable ay yung height noong halaman. So, lahat sila ay variables ng unit natin. Pero merong independent variable, meron kang binabago, at merong dependent variable. Based on sa pagbabago ng independent variable mo, may effect ito dun sa ating dependent variable. So, another key component, sample. Kapag sinabing sample, ito ay subset ng total number of your population. Ito ay subset ng individuals na pinag-aaralan mo, institutions, villages, towns, households, articles, and so on, from whom the data is collected in a research study. So, sa quantitative studies, yung data are coming from your sample. And then from that sample, you will make observations and inferences about the larger population. So, halimbawa, ang population ng LSPU, pinag-aaralan mo yung demographic makeup ng population ng LSPU. So, ang pwedeng gawin mo dyan ay kumuha ka lang ng portion from each campus. So, ang tawag doon ay sample. Because when you study the whole population, it's too expensive. While if you would study a sample, pwede ka na magbigay ng observations and inferences about your larger population based on your samples. Now, for the last component naman, ay tinatawag na hypothesis. Ang hypothesis, ito ay statement that explains the relationship between two or more variables, the validity of which needs to be tested with the help of empirical data. Pag sinabing empirical data, ito yung mga data na na-collect mo. Ito yung numerical data. So, meron kang statement, pwede mo tong patotohanan or pabulaanan. Pwede siyang sabihin mo na totoo yung statement mo, pwede mo rin namang sabihin na ito ay hindi totoo. So, isang example ng hypothesis ay, the higher the educational level of the women, the higher their income level. So, gusto mong patunayan na kapag mataas ang educational level ng mga kababaihan, so yung mga kababaihan yung population mo, yung mga kababaihan ang iyong unit, at yung variable na gusto mong kuhanin ay yung kanilang educational level. Ito ay ang ating independent variable. At ang ating dependent variable ay ang kanilang income level. So this is an example of a hypothesis So you will collect your data, you will analyze your data, and then based on your data na na-collect at na-analyze, pwede mong sabihin na from your data, totoo na kapag mataas ang educational level, ay mataas din yung income level. Ito ay nakabase sa empirical data that you have collected from your unit, and then you collected variables from your unit from a specific sample to nullify or to prove your hypothesis. So now let's proceed to the types of quantitative research. Meron tayong 4 na uri ng quantitative research. Merong descriptive, merong correlational, merong cost comparative, at merong experimental. Let us try to distinguish the 4. When you say descriptive statistics, it describes or quantifies identified variables. So, more on overall summary lang ng mga study variables mo, yung iyong kinukuha or ini-explain pagdating sa descriptive quantitative research. Ang mga questions na involved dito ay how much, ilan, what percentage, gaano kadami, or how often, gaano kadalas. Examples of descriptive research questions are the following. Ano yung percentage ng rag pickers ay babae? How often do adolescents use social networks on a monthly basis? So gusto mo makuha kung gaano kadalas yung mga adolescents ay gumagamit ng social networks kada buwan? And how frequently do children employed in home-based factories go to school each month? So these are the questions for descriptive research type. So that's descriptive quantitative research. You are concerned with the questions how much, what percentage, how often. So dito gagamit ka ng mean, median, mode, variance. So ayun yung mga statistical methods na ginagamit sa descriptive statistics. So, di ba yung mean, isa siyang summary ng variables mo or ng data mo. So, descriptive yung tawag doon. If you're seeking an overall summary of your study variables. Now, pag naman sinabing correlational, it attempts to determine to what extent 2 or more variables are related to each other. So, dito mo in-explore yung pattern, yung trends dun sa data, but may not be able to prove any causal links between the variables. So, kung ito bang variable na ito ay may relationship sa kabilang variable, ang example dyan is the relationship between volunteering and self-esteem. Kapag ba palagi ka nagva-volunteer, tumataas yung self-esteem mo. So, meron ka dyang variable na volunteering, the how often do you volunteer, tapos yung self-esteem mo, kung gaano ba ito kataas or kababa. So, tinitingnan mo kung may relationship sila. Pag ba palagi ka nagva-volunteer, tumataas yung self-esteem mo, or talagang ikaw ay outgoing lang na tao. So, sa correlational, meron ka dyang 2 variables na gusto mong i-check kung sila ba ay connected sa isa't isa. At kung connected, gaano sila ka-connected? Pagtaas ba ng value ng isa ay pagtaas din ng kabila? Pagtaas ba ng value ng isa ay pagbaba ng kabila? So, ang isa pang example dyan ay yung relationship ng smoking at edad ng tao. Okay, so that's another type of quantitative research. Pangatlo ay cost comparative. Ang cost comparative naman, it aims to establish a causal relationship between 2 or more variables. So, halos pareho siya ng experimental research, which is the 4th type, pero magkaiba sila dahil sa cost comparative research, walang randomized assignment of subject in sample to control and experimental groups. Instead, ang researchers ay nagpo-focus on comparing groups who have been exposed to certain treatments, interventions, to other groups that have not had this exposure. So, meron ka ditong 2 uri ng grupo. Yung isa ay nasubmerge sa certain treatment or intervention, yung kabila naman ay hindi. Ito yung example, effect of poverty on mental health. So, kung 2 grupo yung pag-aaralan mo, yung isa ay andito sa gantong class ng economic standing, yung isa naman ay mga mayayaman, yung isa ay mahirap, yung isa ay mayayaman. So, pareho yung variable na i-check mo or pag-aaralan mo, tapos ano yung effect nito sa kanilang mental health. So, that is the cost comparative type of quantitative research. So the last type is experimental. Ang isa pang tawag dito ay true experimentation. Ito ay tinatawag din na gold standard of empirical studies. Bakit? Dahil sa ganitong klase ng study or research, yung independent variable mo ay minamanipulate para ma-assess mo yung causal relationship. So, kung yung kanina ay established na, meron ka ng group of people talaga, ito naman, meron kang group of people, tapos tinatry mo na baguhin yung independent variable mo at makita mo yung cause nito sa dependent variables mo. So, you're trying to experiment. Kapag bakok yung nalagay ko sa aking halaman, ano yung height ng aking halaman after 3 months? So, yung isang, meron ka dyan tatlong halaman, yung isa ay soda, yung isa ay juice, yung isa naman ay water, katulad ng example natin kanina. So, meron kang experimental type of quantitative research. So, yung independent variable, kaya mo siyang i-manipulate para makita mo yung effect nito sa dependent variable. Ito yung example ng experimental research. Effect of classroom teaching and one-on-one teaching on children's academic grades. So, effect of punishment-free education on children's self-esteem. So, if you will think about the first question, ano sa palagay mo yung experimental research setup or setting nito? Di ba, meron ka dyan na mga bata. Tapos yung bata, isa-submerge mo muna sa classroom teaching. Tapos anong effect nito sa grade niya? Yung isa naman, another setup, yung same bata, isa-submerge mo sa one-on-one teaching. Tapos i-check mo, ano yung effect nito sa kanyang academic grades. So that is experimental type of quantitative research. Ngayon, ano yung tools to conduct quantitative research? The common tool is surveys. Pwede itong through phone, online, mail, in person, or pwede rin yung participant mismo yung mag-administer. So, meron din tayong, pwede rin gumamit ng fixed panel studies or cohort studies. So, kapag sinabing cohort studies, ito yung nag-focus ka sa certain cohort or group of people for a particular period of time. So, cohort study is defined as the study design where one or more samples are followed prospectively and subsequent status evaluations with respect to a disease or outcome are conducted to determine which initial participants' exposure characteristics are associated with it. Ngayon, let's talk about the advantages of quantitative research methods. So basically, you're talking about precise data, certain data, so it's more reliable, it's more accurate, and you can generalize your study in a sample to a population. So you can test various hypotheses. Madami kang pwedeng hypothesis na meron, tapos ang dami mong pwedeng i-test. So ito-test mo yung hypothesis mo, and you can nullify that or prove that. You're using scientific methods. It's already proven. It can be replicated, and you are using various statistical techniques. Ngayon, kailan natin kailangan gamitin ang quantitative research methods? Una, kapag kailangan mo ng definitive and accurate numerical answers. So, since ito ay replicable across different settings, pwede mo rin itong gamitin if you want to obtain information from different contexts. Halimbawa ay yung coronavirus sa Philippines versus US. Okay, so the questions that you have, the research questions that you have dun sa experiment mo or yung sa research mo sa Philippines ay pwede mong i-replicate sa research mo sa ibang context naman, which is sa United States. So, kung marami ka ding hypothesis na gusto mong i-test at yung relationship ng two or more variables, quantitative research din yung pwede mong gamitin. And ito, yung quantitative research, ito ay generalizable to large populations. So, that's it for our lesson number 1. So, as a summary, ang quantitative research methods are oriented towards the collection or conversion of data in a numerical form. Statistical tests are used to analyze the collected data to explain certain phenomena. And then, we studied about the key components of quantitative research methods: units, variables, hypothesis, and sample. The 4 types of quantitative research: descriptive, correlational, cost comparative, and experimental. The primary tool for quantitative research, which is survey, the advantages and the disadvantages. By the way, the disadvantage of quantitative methods is that the research tool is fairly rigid. Hindi mo to pwedeng i-expand yung reason behind their answers. So, minsan, ang ginagawa ng mga researchers ay pinaghahalo yung quantitative at yung qualitative questions. Okay, so here are the works that I the resources that I use for this presentation. So now, you may proceed to your performance task number 1. Open your Google Classroom and answer performance task number 1.